is probably one of the most exciting times for Bitcoin now, with such a wide range of topics and verticals that are all sort of focused back on and on top of Bitcoin. The cool thing about Bitcoin is that anyone can do anything they want with it, right? I do think that it's very important for the development of Bitcoin to remain open source and for people to have an open mind on what that would be.
I definitely seen a trend where people kind of treat the block space on Bitcoin and also on Fractal with a little bit more care. For better,
you just have to listen to your users. I know you guys at Fractal have been doing that, right? Listening to the community and try to build for them, and that's what we need to do in crypto.
Welcome again to the Fractal Podcast. I am Spencer Yang, the core contributor to Fractal, and today we're joined by Jason Lau, the Chief Innovation Officer at OKX. Jason has been innovating and leading the charge at OKX and OKCoin for the past 8 years. It's super awesome to have Jason on today with us. Welcome, Jason. Welcome to the Fractal Podcast.
Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again, Spencer.
Awesome. Yeah, I see that you have a really nice background. Which office or location around the world are you in these days?
I'm currently in New York. It's Thanksgiving week here in the U.S. and my wife's family is in the area, so I'm excited to be here.
How did you first, get into crypto?
I first got involved in crypto in 2013. I was just coming out doing a startup in the Bay Area at the time. In our spare time, we got to hang out and go to these Bitcoin meetups. I don't know if you remember, Spencer, back then, 2013, it was still early days for Bitcoin and crypto, obviously. And there was just a lot of talk about what this technology could do. There were no tokens yet. There were discussions about what Bitcoin could be used to represent value and how it could extend beyond just obviously the asset, but what adoption might look like. It was a pretty interesting time, and that sort of piqued my interest at the moment. I have a background in economics and finance, and that intersection between tech, finance, economics was just very interesting for me. To sum up quickly, I think it wasn't until 2016 before I joined OKX and professionally dived into the space. It's been a fun journey since.
Would you say that, your experience in the traditional finance space previously get you like a leg up at the beginning for understanding what crypto could enable? I remember myself back in 2013, like in 2014, when I attended my first Bitcoin meetup, I just saw people like scanning QR codes and so on. I was like so confused, right? But I went back and I studied and so on. I was just like, oh, this is actually really interesting. How did you find that yourself?
I used to work at Barclays on the trading desk. I remember, I think it was 2011. We were talking about Bitcoin on the trading desk, but more as a joke, right? Like, look at these guys, look at this. This can't possibly work. There's a lot of skepticism for this new technology, which makes it so when you come and learn about it, you're very much critiquing and trying to understand everything deeply, right? And as you peel out all those layers, it's like, wait a minute. What I learned before actually is not maybe correct. And I think it got me deeper into exploring more.
Definitely. I think like part of the crypto journey for many people was like reading the Bitcoin whitepaper, right? And then like reading up the forums and so on, and also just like participating in the conversations, right? I think there was like many publications like Bitcoin Magazine and so on. How did you, I guess, learn more about Bitcoin, through in the early days?
Yeah, so I mentioned the meetups. Spencer, you mentioned meetups. I think that to me was one of the best ways. I think just being able to ask questions and hear what people were talking about. White paper is still very good. And actually, early days, there were some pretty good educational videos that people put up on YouTube and things like that already. Without seeing how things played out, you get a feel for, Bitcoin working over time, right? Like through the ups and downs and even through some of the contentious times, block wars and things like that. It wasn't until you really appreciate that, you build that conviction over time.
Take us through a little bit like what your recent years of experience have been in the space. I think your role in the OKX organization has also evolved, right? So tell us a little bit more about what you have kind of experienced, and maybe what are some of the lessons that you have learned over the past couple of years.
For us, we've been very fortunate to have, I guess, done well and grown. And the real reason I think why is being able to adapt to what users want. Crypto changes so quickly, as we mentioned. New things come about, new technologies, new approaches, different themes and verticals. And I think for us at OKX, I think a core part of that was being able to focus on what the user wanted And then being able to build products and services that match that. I think that really was the lesson learned, and that conviction around being in the crypto space and helping develop users and getting their education and awareness into the space. I think that's really the core. I remember back when I joined in 2016 or so, 17 or so, this was pre-ICO, pre-real crypto boom, right? Even for us, I think we made a few mistakes where we were not sure about, is crypto dead? Is this gonna, last is this gonna persist? And we experimented doing things that were slightly less crypto, more on the tangential side. And in hindsight, obviously that was a mistake, right? Like it was a waste of our resources, waste of our time. We should have just doubled down and continued building our infrastructure. And that sort of cost us that when 2017 came, because we weren't quite ready for this explosion in protocols and experimentation, new tokens. And I think that was the biggest lesson for us is, look, we're here to drive access and adoption for crypto, and that's what we need to be have high conviction about, and we should not lose our focus. I think was one of the big lessons, and you just have to listen to your users. I know you guys at Fractal have been doing that, right? Listening to the community and try to build for them, and that's what we need to do in crypto.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that I noticed as well is that, like building in crypto, it's actually so much deeper than just like, integrating the blockchain or just understanding it, right? There's so much like technical depth that you kind of need to go into, and even like the narrative of things, right? I think people's perception and also understanding of Bitcoin and crypto has changed over time. How the narrative, I guess, changed, in your mind, in the last couple of years, or even like this year for you?
I remember on CNBC or something where someone was like, "What's the point of Bitcoin when you can just create new Bitcoins by forking new chains all the time, right? Like, how would that work?" And I think we've come quite a long way since, right? We've dreamt in the past of having sovereign states adopt Bitcoin, and we're seeing that play out in real time. We've dreamt about the institutions, right? And obviously now we've made tremendous progress there with ETFs and now options on ETFs, and even more and more sort of Bitcoin-based financial products. The narrative has shifted from doubt to, okay, acceptance, store value. Now it's like, what could be built on top of this store value? And then obviously with what you guys are working on and others too, driving this narrative that Bitcoin could be more than just store value, right? There's always been the payments angle. I think it's being worked on, but also what else can Bitcoin do? This is probably one of the most exciting times for Bitcoin now, with such a wide range of topics and verticals that are all sort of focused back on and on top of Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's really interesting, right? As you mentioned, like, I think there were many debates back in the past, and there were also like many other ecosystem that emerged, right? I think like back in the day, there was like EOS, there was Ethereum, of course, and still Ethereum is very much relevant, right? And then I think in 2019, people started talking about Solana and of course DeFi and so on, right? I think I remember during the 2020 times, a lot of people who were in the Bitcoin community felt almost like a little bit sidelined, but all the action that was happening in other ecosystems, like things just seem to be moving so fast. There were so many new interesting things, and nothing seemed to be happening on Bitcoin, right? I remember some of my friends were like, "Hey, there's Lightning Network, there's some scaling solutions and some conversations, but the adoption seemed really weak." And then I think almost like suddenly in 2023, we saw with OKX, with the Unisat, and many other players in the space are embracing and working on Ordinals, BRC20s, and of course this year was Runes and many other kind of like narratives, and also like Fractal, right? I think we just saw like so much more innovation around Bitcoin over the past 2 years. It's almost like a weird, suddenly overnight there was this like emergence of trends, right? I'd love to hear in your mind too, like was that kind of your observation, or was there something more to that?
I think for us at OKX, we were fortunate to always have been involved in advancing Bitcoin technologies. What I mean by that is, even with mainnet Bitcoin, Bitcoin Core, there have been upgrades and progression, right? Things like SegWit, Taproot, Lightning. These are technologies that unlock new use cases, and it takes time for people to figure it out. But even at OKX, we've been, I would say, one of the earlier companies to support these when they come on, right? So for example, Lightning, we've added it. We've had support for Lightning for 4+ years now on the exchange. SegWit and Taproot, obviously we supported those very quickly after they launched. And so when Ordinals came about and BRC20s came about and all this sort of explosion in innovation on Bitcoin and experimentation, we were just really with the right mindset of, okay, well, we should support that too. And so Ordinals was something we added support for in our wallet very quickly and in our NFT marketplace very quickly. That did take off and people really enjoyed that. I think at one time, I think the marketplace has obviously developed over time now, but at one point, we had something like 90% market share. Obviously not necessarily healthy, but I think it goes to show that we were helping drive some of this use case on the marketplace.
Yeah, I think you mentioned about market share and so on. It's definitely super fascinating, right? I think from what it sounds like, you guys developed this like muscle of like innovating in Bitcoin, right? By embracing new innovations in Bitcoin, almost like by default, right? As you mentioned, like when Lightning come out, Taproot support SegWit, Ordinals, and so on. Whereas I've seen actually some other firms, I'm not going to name which firms are these, they tend to ask questions like, why should we support Bitcoin innovation, right? Why should we support Bitcoin? How does the mental model or like this mindset happen within OKX? What is it about? Leadership, yourself, how do you work with the team to ensure this mindset?
We have a grant program, a developer grant program for open source Bitcoin development. We've been running that for 4 years now, 5 years now, actually. And we've given out almost $2 million there. No strings attached to developers and contributors, right? To build and support the Bitcoin ecosystem. We've also done things like support some of these Bitcoin-focused meetups and events, especially recently around some of the Ordinals community, really trying to get that support and sort of just bringing the people together to build on top of Bitcoin. You're familiar with Stacks, right? They did things, they're trying to do things on Bitcoin too. And, again, we were early supporters there. Of course, you should support Bitcoin. Why would you not, right? With Lightning support, as I mentioned earlier, having launched that over 4 years ago, these are things that are, I think, is important to our space, and we need to be investing in that.
I think the institutions have finally arrived in Bitcoin, right? I think like I just saw like today, one of the Telegram bots I subscribe to, I think mentioned, and I quote that, I think Michael Saylor with MicroStrategy, I think holds now 386,000 Bitcoins, which are acquired at an aggregate price of $56,000 per Bitcoin. What's your thoughts about institutional adoption of Bitcoin these days? What's happening here?
The cool thing about Bitcoin is that anyone can do anything they want with it, right? I do think that it's very important for the development of Bitcoin to remain open source and for people to have an open mind on what that would be. I think that's where the crux of some of the contentiousness is whether are institutions good or bad. And I think at the core it's neutral, but more adoption and more awareness for Bitcoin is always good. I think I would love to see more usage of Bitcoin. Usage of Bitcoin is always good for Bitcoin. And so that's what we're trying to do, is drive that, obviously, drive the awareness, but also drive the usage. I think that's where it comes down to.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. It's like, I think one observation, almost like a qualm that I have for so much institutional adoption of crypto and Bitcoin is that many of these institutions just kind of hold it in custody, right? It's almost like once they buy it and goes to custody, this Bitcoin will never be used until they are sold or lent or whatsoever, right? Hey, why don't they actually use it to do some things, right? Facilitate some peer-to-peer transfers, right? Maybe like participate in like a grants program, like what you mentioned that you guys do, or like maybe like sponsor some education purposes, or even like maybe like I don't know, mint some ordinals whatsoever, right? Like that would be really nice, right? Like, these are the things that I kind of wish some of this institutional adoption that happened to Bitcoin is actually going to be able to do in the future, right? But we'll see.
I agree. I think it's a journey for everyone, right? Even for myself, probably for you and others. We first started just by hodling. Like that was it. And then you realize, okay, I maybe can set up a Lightning wallet. I maybe can go and experiment and try my hand at Ordinals, or maybe some of the newer things now, right? Get some yield, whatever, right? So I think it's a journey. I think everyone progresses through that stage where you first have to understand that this is valuable and worth holding and worth owning. Then you realize what you can do with it down the road. So it will take some time. I don't necessarily see BlackRock going to start minting ordinals, but maybe they'll do something more on the sort of DeFi side with their Bitcoin at some point. We'll see. We'll see.
It's a matter of time, right? Definitely as more tooling becomes available, it will become easier. I'm sure right now many of the custody providers, from a security perspective, wouldn't want them to participate in those kind of like Taproot transactions and so on. But I think as we get better on those, that'll be interesting. I think you mentioned yield earlier, Jason. I think many people in the Bitcoin space is aware. I think more or less, okay, I would say maybe some is aware of some of the yield opportunities seems to be coming. Right, there are protocols like Babylon that's trying to enable Bitcoin staking, with a cluster setup. There's also a lot of like liquid staking tokens that have cropped up as a result of that, and also like I guess like bridge tokens, right? Like Coinbase has launched CBBTC and some of the other derivatives and so on. Of course, you can then use that to participate in DeFi, right? What are some of these things that you are paying attention to, or how should people think about this particular space around yield?
Yeah. So I mean, yield is a very interesting next step for Bitcoin assets. I think, we've been holding Bitcoin for 15 years now and not being able to do much with it. And to be able to get yield on Bitcoin, either by staking it or other means, hopefully, you still remain, have custody of your Bitcoin. I think that's very exciting. I think that's one of the most exciting unlocks that are going to come. What needs to happen, obviously, is that people need to get comfortable with how this works, whether there are any risks. And I think, again, it's something like you mentioned, it will just take some time for people to get familiar with and get used to. And even for us at OKX, we're adding support for that, right? The people that want to use their Bitcoin in OKX Wallet, for example, can engage and interact with staking on Babylon.
Yeah, I noticed that you all have this like almost a Web3 entryway, right, where a lot of the products are highlighted in the OKX wallet and so on to be able to discover. And I think that's really awesome for onboarding.
That's the point, right? We're trying to make it hopefully as easy as possible for people to discover and then learn about how to use this and then participate. That's what we would love to see.
I think one of the things I really enjoy about the OKX wallet experience as well, and of course this a little bit of like a shameless plug on the Fractal side too, is that any user who wants to like send and receive Fractal on OKX wallet can just like switch their network address selector from Bitcoin to Fractal, and it's the same address, right? It's the same native SegWit address, the same Taproot address, and they're able to essentially do that. And I think that's a very, very powerful experience, right? Of course, OKX does this support for many other networks as well, including Fractal. And it's one of those things where I think users are now starting to realize probably the convenience of things that they never experienced before. How does your team prioritize the OKX wallet product? How important do you think this is? How does that play into the overall strategy that you're thinking through?
From a wallet perspective, what we're trying to do is build something that's, our marketing tagline is on-chain, any chain, right? And so we're trying to build something that's really seamless for users to take advantage of and access basically anything they want on chain. They should be able to do via the wallet. And the wallet is, self-custodial, but also very, very powerful. You mentioned the ability to switch to Fractal. And when we try to work with, I think we're at over 100 different networks today supported in the wallet. And so when you try to support and prioritize, we very much, again, to boil back to what we talked about earlier, is we just kind of look and listen to the community, right? Obviously, there's been a lot of interest in accessing Fractal. And even on day one, in early September, we were able to support the launch of Fractal on mainnet. And so, that's very important to us because it's important to our users. And so for users that were able to play around with BRC20, Ordinals, runes, whatever it was, and then to be able to reuse that and then also engage with Fractal, I think that was a very big, well-received sort of feature from our users. So it's good to be able to listen and build things for them.
Institutional adoption for Bitcoin has gone up. Price seems to be good, and of course, a lot of Bitcoin innovation has been happening, right, including Fractal and whatnot. But the other ecosystem are also doing really well, right? So how do you balance between support for these various ecosystems and the Bitcoin ecosystem?
I would love to say that we can do everything great and everything at once. I think there is ultimately some juggling, and we need to prioritize. But fortunately for us, I think we do have a lot of people that are very close to the community and can really spot and identify where we should be deploying our resources. So for Bitcoin, for example, we have a team that's just dedicated to the Bitcoin ecosystem. And that allows us to really keep on trend with what's happening within the Bitcoin space, including new products, new features, and experiments. And so that's why we can sort of move really fast on the Bitcoin front. That said, we also have a team that looks at, for example, what's happening in Solana. We have a team that's looking at the Sui ecosystem. We have a lot of teams that look at different ecosystem so that we can stay up to date. That even doesn't even overlap with our, we have our institutional team, we have other product teams. So we're able to, hopefully build things that are meaningful to all the various different segments that we service.
How do you kind of see these sort of centralized exchange and decentralized exchange kind of products playing out? I think this year specifically, there's like so much new developments happening in the DEX space as well, perpetuals, spot, and like Uniswap and so on. And of course, centralized exchanges also played a very, very significant role overall. So how do you kind of see that tension, or is it kind of a synergy that you're seeing?
I think there's a complementary nature here, right? Because at the core, the products are different. They serve different users. At least on the liquidity front, the more venues, the more products, I think it actually is net beneficial because you have more room for price discovery. You have more room for different participants to input, to contribute and participate. So I think net, it's very positive. And what we're trying to do is to build products that service both segments well, right? So for example, in the centralized exchange space, that's where more institutions are participating, right? A couple of weeks ago, we just announced a partnership with Standard Chartered Bank, for example, right? Like we're really working with tier one institutions now globally to accelerate even more institutional adoption because they want to tap into liquidity and all that. And then on the DeFi side, one thing that we've built that I think is pretty cool is we started opening up some of our APIs and infrastructure to developers in the space. We're calling it OKX OS, meaning you can build DeFi applications and anything on chain using the stack. One API in particular, or one tool in particular, is the DEX API that we've opened up. Meaning we can now allow other developers, other applications to take our DEX aggregator technology and embed it within their application and use case. We've been seeing tremendous pickup there. And that really drives to your point, which is, you can now do decentralized trading on a wide variety of venues and set that up very quickly. And so I think that's very powerful, right? Again, they're completely different users. There's obviously going to be people that dabble in both and bring the liquidity, share the price discovery. But net, it's beneficial. I don't think there's tension. I think it's very much a complementary endeavor.
Building a decentralized exchange experience is actually really tough, right? And I think we've seen this user experience, I would say, like demands from the users to become even greater, right? And I think it's awesome that, as you mentioned, that with the OKX OS product, you have this tooling to make it easier for developers to be able to build DEXs. I think we are trying to do the same as well on our end with like Pizza Swap, which is using the BRC20 module concept. We're trying to essentially enable like a better, more seamless sort of decentralized trading experience for users as well. And I think of course also appreciate the OKX indexing and the team support on being able to sort of index those transfers, right? Like building this on Bitcoin is actually really hard, right? Because people expect like a Solana experience, right? Or like a centralized experience, right? But on Bitcoin, also on Fractal, the confirmation times is a little bit longer and so on. And I think that does create some user experience hurdles. But yeah, we'll work on it.
What are the confirmation times on Fractal?
So on Fractal, the confirmation times are 30 seconds, whereas for Bitcoin it's 10 minutes. So it's 20 times faster, but it's definitely not as fast as that of Solana and so on, right? And we've definitely seen some retail users who come in and say, hey, why is it not Solana? And we're like, it's different, right? It's different.
Yeah, I think Solana has really set that bar high for especially meme coin trading and all this stuff. It's a pretty good experience there. And so yeah, we've got other chains have some work to do perhaps.
I think the good thing is that overall, at least with the provenance of Bitcoin and also the availability of blocks and also the validation and everything, I've definitely seen a trend where people kind of treat the block space on Bitcoin, also on Fractal with a little bit more care, for better or for worse. Right? I think in that sense, it's kind of nice. Whereas for like some of the larger output blockchain networks like Solana and so on, they tend to be like pruned more often. People can kind of care less about the provenance and the history. I think in some sense that, I guess the user behavior is a little bit different.
Right. I think that's also the same with NFTs on different chains, right? Like people just don't value them, or people value them differently. Let's just say our point to the sort of centralized versus decentralized argument is, look, there are different types of users and there's different types of use cases, and I think the differentiation is actually incredibly valuable.
Yeah, totally. I think like people perception of even the NFT community, right? On like Ethereum, on Tezos, on Solana, and on Bitcoin, it's like quite different, right? I think definitely speaking to artists across the board, I've like observed some different preferences, and it's definitely like one of those situations where it's getting to now that is a lot of choice for everyone, right? Whatever their preferences are. I think you mentioned OKX OS a little bit. And I know that's a relatively new initiative, at least from a branding perspective, because many of these APIs must have been available for a while as well, right? How do you think about this vision of OKX OS in terms of like the products and services that we should expect to see going forward?
What we're really focusing on is building a brand and an initiative that targets specifically for developers. And so with developers, obviously the messaging is different. The sort of how we present our tooling needs to be a little bit different. We've done, like you said, we've done and opened up our APIs for more so historically on the centralized exchange side, right? We provided a lot of APIs for traders and that ecosystem to build on top of. But now on the decentralized side, on the on-chain side, I think packaging all of our capabilities and opening up, some of our infrastructure, and we'll continue to do so. I think this is, like you said, it's relatively new. Some of the tech behind the wallet, we're allowing even competitor wallets to use, right? Like even competitor wallets use our DEX API. I think we have a lot to contribute, but how do we make sure that developers, the market sees what we're offering on a tech and developer stack level be neutral, right? How do we make sure that people understand that we are trying to do this for the ecosystem growth angle? We're not trying to do something for some other nefarious purpose. We've got a lot of work to do there. I think even for Fractal, our marketplace API supports, Fractal NFTs and things like that. Even on our Explorer side, I believe we have support for Fractal Bitcoin. And I obviously think our tech is very strong. How powerful it is to be able to spin up and support your ecosystem, but also other ecosystems as needed.
If you have like a magic wand, what would you say you want to like maybe improve or solve for in the Bitcoin ecosystem or the Fractal ecosystem in the next couple of years?
Using Bitcoin is still a bit clunky. Switching between different wallet types, and there's different address types, and there's Lightning. Like all of these are not necessarily the same. And so I think the user experience for using Bitcoin still has a lot of work. I was in Lugano in Switzerland, and I was trying to pay. I don't know, there's a lot of Bitcoin merchants and acceptance there. And I was trying to pay for my coffee using a Lightning wallet. It didn't work. We both got an error we've never seen before. And, this is already with a shop that was very familiar with accepting Bitcoin. And so I think my magic wand would be somehow we could smooth out all of these and make it go away. But unfortunately, the reality is that we have a lot of work to do. And it takes a lot of hard work from ourselves, but also from the rest of the community to make sure that these things, the interoperability, the use cases, all these things get to a point where it's very seamless. Whether it's, we discuss staking and yield, I think that's still on the forefront. But if you ask even someone who has owned Bitcoin for many years to go do that, like they will look at you and they have no idea what the next step is, right? And so I think we're not quite there yet. Just a lot of work to be done. But hey, we're only 15 years into this, so.
Yeah, we're only a 15-year-old startup, but if you think about it, there's so many other industries that have been around for such a long time, right? In some ways, like I think if you look at Bitcoin and cryptocurrency in a broad spectrum of like currency or commodities and so on, it's definitely been for way long, right? It's just that this particular format is like very much work in progress, as you mentioned, right? Like paying for coffee and so on. That should be a solved problem, but unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be.
Not quite. And even for sort of currency, commodity, that acceptance, 15 years is just a drop in the bucket, right? And I think there's some interesting use cases coming up where if people can unlock the stablecoin on Bitcoin. I think that might be a big unlock. We'll see.
Yeah, speaking about stablecoins on Bitcoin, this is actually a direction that we've been pushing forward quite a little bit on the Fractal front as well. Any of these stablecoin protocols can actually be launched on BRC20, on Runes, and on Fractal, or any of the standards that we've been pushing for today. It is ready, right? There's a reason why BRC20 has a mint and burn mechanism, which facilitates the issuance and minting of stablecoins, right? And I think it's the reason why like a lot of these indexing work that we've put in on a Uniset side and OKX have been put in is there, right? I think these are all like capabilities that actually allow us to be able to do so. And I think the beauty of it, I'm going to like sell this a little bit to people who listens, right, in this particular podcast. That hey, with like Fractal actually supporting the same Bitcoin Taproot and native SegWit address with 30-second confirmation times, it's actually quite a seamless experience, right? If I'm sending you stablecoins on Fractal to your Bitcoin address, all you have to do is switch your network from your Bitcoin mainnet address to Fractal, and you'll be able to see that confirmation in a very, very short amount of time on your address, right? So I think we are actually ready as a network, and as an ecosystem for stablecoins to be native on Bitcoin or on Fractal as of today. But we just need the right partners to be listening and to actually experiment, and not just on ERC20 standards and SPL standards.
Or what do you guys think about Lightning on Fractal, or how does that work? Or is that not compatible?
Because Fractal uses Bitcoin core software, so theoretically speaking, anything that is supported on Bitcoin can be supported on Fractal. So it's something that we've been looking at. I think we definitely see some issues with Lightning overall in terms of like maintaining our nodes and so on. And then of course the dependencies and whatnot. I think some of the experiences that you've seen as well. So these are the things that I think we do see to be issues. And we think that at least for Fractal specifically right now, a lot of the interest in the community, to your point about user community, is actually around the protocol level stuff like BRC20, Runes, as well as like CAT20, which is a native standard to Fractal is enabled because of the OPCAT opcode, right? So we can definitely dive a little bit more into that. But what happens is that I think with these various protocols actually on Fractal and on Bitcoin, we see that these standards are getting a lot more adoption at a native level, which is something that we're slightly more excited about.
Got it. I think that is the big difference that you guys on Fractal can unlock, right? That experimentation with OPCAT and all that. So that's exciting. I'm definitely keeping an eye on what happens there.
Yeah, I think like maybe in your mind, what are some of the more underrated innovations or things that are happening in crypto these days?
There's a lot of people, even in the policy, government, regulatory front, that really do understand what the industry is about, or what crypto is about. Oftentimes, we just look at government orgs bad, right? Or like, hey, they did that. And it's underrated in the sense that I don't think we appreciate how much work industry associations and people do to really help bridge the gap. And there are a lot of people that are advancing on the policy front, advancing sort of the and building momentum for us. And we're hopefully going to see some opportunistic changes, coming forward in 2025. But like again, it's just all that effort, all that people, a little bit underappreciated is my take. And I think 2025 is going to be a very interesting year.
100%. I think like over the past, like I guess month or so of like the U.S. elections and so on, I think I forget who was it. Maybe it's Brian Armstrong of like Coinbase was tweeting that we finally have the most crypto-friendly administration ever, right? That's been voted into Senate and the House and so on in the U.S. at least. And I think that's been actually a very, very positive trend, right? And to your point, it's really the work of like so many people. I think OKX included, I'm sure, that has been like pushing this like an agenda forward and having a lot more support at the various levels. So yeah, I really appreciate I think all the folks who's working behind the scenes.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the US too, right? I think we're seeing this play out in many countries. We just launched and got licensed in a few months ago now, but like in Singapore and in Dubai and others, where again, there's all of these places, there's a lot of effort that go into education and making sure all the stakeholders understand our industry, our business. Much like people don't understand the work that goes on from sort of the technical side, I think there's a disconnect there, but a lot of underappreciation.
What are some of your, I would say, maybe one or two of advice that you would have for builders in the Bitcoin community who's like launching their projects for the first time, or who just like maybe got some users or did some like awesome launches? What's your advice to builders in the space?
Having that conviction, even for us, it took us some time to really find it. We wavered in some of our earlier days. crypto, the technology, I think it's very important. It's an opportunity of our generation, I think. And then listening and building for the users, right? Like getting that feedback and trying to see how you can build that product for them is just so important. It guides us to this day, and I think it should be for anyone.
Yeah, Jason, any like parting words for you as well? Like, what are you gonna like spend the rest of the day doing today?
It's very important to not get caught up in the hype. Having done and worked on this for so long, is you have to take that even keel, long-term vision, right? Like step day after day, we still have things to do, and we need to work hard on and move, at least improve our organization, improve our product. So that's what we're focused on. I've got meetings all day to do that. The cycles come and go, right? You get euphoric, and then you get really depressed, but like you kind of have to discount that and just keep on iterating, keep on building, and that's the most important thing for us too.
Thank you again for taking time off your day to come speak to the builders in our community. Thank you so much, and let's keep building.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Spencer.